Now, while a letter grade system may be on the menu for the city's mobile food vendors, New York's grab-and-go chefs must contend with more pressing matters on a daily basis. Fierce competition for prime parking spots, zealous enforcement of sometimes confusing regulations, and then there's always Mother Nature to contend with. New York City's 5,100 permitted mobile food vendors rise to the challenge daily, and they have some far-reaching allies who are ready to serve up reform.
Well, most of their energy is focused now on lifting the cap of the number of city-issued vendor permits, unchanged since the 80s. So will putting more mobile options on the road compromise health and safety or secure our place as the innovative street food capital of America? Yes, please. Elise Golden is the senior organizer at the Street Vendor Project at the Urban Justice Center. Thanks for joining us today,
Yeah,
Elise.
thanks for having us.
We're also happy to have a member of the Street Vendor Project and the proprietor of Fruity Smoothie Bar, and he's here right now, Mohammed Atiyah.
Hi.
And Adam Sobel is the chef and owner of the Cinnamon Snail, a 2014 Vindy Award winner. He's also the author of this new cookbook, Street Vegan. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
And joining us from Arlington, Virginia via Skype is Burt Gall. He's the senior attorney at the Institute for Justice, where he directs the National Street Vending Initiative. Thank you all for being here and there. How you doing, Burt?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, the voice of God in the studio now. So you want to kick it off? Good.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Elise and Mohammed, you're a member. Elise, what can you tell us about the Street Vendor Project? Let's just start there.
Yeah, so we're a membership-based organization for vendors. We have almost 2,000 members, and we advocate for more respect for vendors and better policies, and we want vendors to have a voice in the policies that affect them.
So a second ago, I just alluded to the fact in that package that you can't separate street vendors from New York. It's like ingrained in our fabric. It's not like a fad like in some cities, or, oh, we got a food truck. So that being said, who's benefiting from the caps on the number of folks who we can have out on the streets? Lots has changed since the 1980s, so why are we still sort of stuck in that mode?
That's a great question. The people who are benefiting are the people who are lucky enough to have gotten the permits back in the 70s and 80s. Mohammed can tell you they're renting out their permits. They're making money off of the people who are actually working on the street.
Mohammed, what's your experience been?
Yeah, these permits holders, they might be out of the business. They are doing different jobs. They might be in different states, sometimes different countries. They don't even live here, and they still renting out the permit in the black market. They get all the cash and they just go away. But us vendors are the one who's working in the street and just suffering from all of this.
So, Bert, are we in some murky legal waters with that kind of sort of shadow economy?
I think,
Well,
yes.
The key thing here is that all regulation should be about public health and safety. And an arbitrary number of vendor licenses in New York doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't make anybody better off whatsoever. And that's why New York City should follow what the Street Vendor Project's doing and get rid of the cap and let these people get to work.
Now, Adam, you didn't renew your permit for New York City. Am I right about that?
Right.
What made you get out of the business?
Well, it's super shady dealing with this black market. Like, it's straight up not legal to rent a permit on the black market, but it's the only way. You know, when I first got started, I called up 311 and I was like, all right, how do I get a permit to do this? And they're like, oh, no problem. Go to the Department of Consumer Affairs. You get on the waiting list, which they don't mention has not been open since 1991.
Yeah.
And you get one of these permits as they get surrendered. But of course, these are permits that people are renting out for more than 100 times what the cost is to renew it from the city. So nobody in their right mind would let that expire or be revoked on them. So no permits go back into this pool to be available to people on the waiting list. So
Is
really,
that the crux of the shadiness that you speak of?
well, I mean, the crux of the shadiness is you're dealing with like the absolute kind of like wannabes of the Sopranos that you've got to meet. You have to like meet them in some post-industrial area of Queens with money in a bag. It's super shady. It's like buying drugs,
So, Bert,
wouldn't know about it.
How do these permit regulations and this so-called shadiness in NYC, how does it compare to the rest of the country?
Well, the permit situation in New York City is bad, no doubt about it. But we're seeing bad food truck and vending laws throughout the nation. In a number of places, vendors, including food trucks, are told that they can't be within certain distances of restaurants. Other places, they're blocked out of the entire downtown area, and it forces people to go to the outskirts. And who gets hurt by this? Consumers. Because after all, people should be the ones who decide what they get for lunch, not the government.
So then, Elise, are Mohammed and Mr. S over here, are they getting an unfair advantage that sort of like the brick and mortar people don't, because they get to be on our public streets and they have the trash pickup that the restaurants pay for? The people who own restaurants have a whole litany of things that they say not fair.
Not at all. Like, the vendors have to pay taxes. The vendors have to navigate this really complicated system. They're small business owners, and they should be respected in that way. They have workers, they bring jobs, and then they also feed people who can't afford necessarily to go pay $10, $15 at a restaurant. Right. They are serving like the everyday people, and like Bert said, like, they should be able to have the option of what kind of food that they're eating.
Mohammed, what, if any, sort of divide is there between food carts and food trucks?
The carts is a little smaller, it is not a vehicle, and it can be on a sidewalk. I mean, it must be on a sidewalk. But the food truck, it cannot be on a sidewalk, it has to be in the street. And it's actually a truck, a vehicle.
Right, so
This is
there's
maybe
a
the difference.
couple advantages and disadvantages of both models. For food trucks, there's a couple legal issues that we face that make it even more difficult, in that as of a few years ago, when food trucks really exploded in the city, a few business improvement districts in the city that really wanted to get food trucks out of their neighborhoods were like scrambling to find some loophole to get food trucks out of their areas. So they dug up this like turn of the century push cart law that said you couldn't sell merchandise from a metered location, and had the definition of merchandise amended to include food, so that now, you know, even getting these expensive permits and doing everything else as legitimately as possible, you know, just by being open anywhere in the city, you're breaking the law. So, I mean, it's essentially, in the stroke of a pen, made food trucks like illegal to operate in New York City.
Well, Bert, you know, we like to think that we lead everything here in New York City, but who's really eating our lunch when it comes to getting these regulations right for vendors on the street?
Well, I think if you're looking at the best food truck regulations overall across the country, it has to be, unfortunately, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is Los Angeles lets the trucks go where they want, only subjects them to true health and safety regulations, and lets the consumer decide where they get their food. LA is a great city for food trucks, Austin's a great city for food trucks, and New York can be a great city for food trucks as well, as long as it lifts that cap and gets rid of that parking restriction.
So we could do a whole show on this, I feel like, but I want to go, what are next steps? Like, how are we going to improve this situation, or at least begin to? Elise?
Yeah, so we're working with our members on a legislative campaign. We want to pass a law in City Council that would eliminate the caps, or at least significantly raise the number of permits available. We also want to change different regulations on the streets so that there's more space to vend. So not only more permits, but like vendors are criminalized for selling, you know, 1 foot too close to an entrance. They get a $500 ticket. And that's not fair for, you know, an immigrant vendor that's making, you know, maybe a few $100s a day at most. You know, that ticket really impacts them. So we're trying to pass legislation in City Council. We're working really closely with the Speaker and other council members. So we hope that that can happen soon.
So in the package that preceded this conversation, we talked about in the state legislature, there's a bill now. What hopes do you have that would pass, the one that would require letter grades for food trucks?
Yeah, so that bill is to sort of reinstate this street vendor review panel.
Right.
We think, you know,
We're past that.
that's okay,
Yeah.
but the biggest issue right now is the permits, and unfortunately that doesn't really address that. You know, it encourages conversation about that issue, but we really want, you know, the government to take action and for vendors to be able to work legally and safely on the streets.
Gotcha.
Burke, can we get your final brief word on what your hope for the future of the permits and everything that's going on is?
Well, I hope that both the city and the state of New York learn the lessons of many other municipalities and states around the country, which is that food trucks are a huge improvement on everyday Americans' quality of life. That this is something that we want to encourage. We want to encourage entrepreneurship. That means we should be lifting this cap. We should be allowing trucks to park in metered spaces. And if people feel more comfortable with letter grades on their food trucks, as is the case in LA, all to the good. What we want is simply to remove those arbitrary and protectionist restrictions and let people get to work.
Thank you, Bert.
So the final word, our last 30 seconds go to you guys. You can let us know what we should know about food trucks and how great they are.
How great they are. They are so great. Food trucks, I'll leave it to Adam. He got the greatest truck in the city. We already know that. But actually about food vending in the street of New York City, it is really great. We have maybe different food, a lot of food in the street. Just people always get to, like, I don't think you will find a lot of restaurants with a line at the lunchtime, but guess what, in Midtown, when you walk, even here in Brooklyn, you will find a good food truck, you will find a big line of people. Food is nice, good, cheap, different, way different from restaurants, and even, like, good for the economics too, like, way cheaper. Besides, this permit issue has given us a lot of hard time. Everybody, like, one of the biggest truck in the city is going out of business. That's a very sad news, right? Like, everybody's sad about them. A lot of customers complaining. You guys can go see Adam, how he is. He's like,
You can find
so
Adam someplace
sad.
else. So Adam, you have this book out now?
Yeah, I'll be crying into my soft dog under a blanket, selling you the book upon Amazon or in the bookstores. But yeah, you could get it anywhere. It's called Street Vegan. And I'm still running the truck here and there at special events and looking to launch some other crazy new thing I can't tell you anything about.
We'll have you back sometime soon to talk about it. Bert, Mohammed, Elise, Adam, thank you guys very much for being here. And good luck with the good fight.
Having us.
For sure.